Some earnings to report this morning. Paramount Global just out with its quarterly reports. Earnings coming in at 49 cents a share, beat estimates of 24 cents. Revenue came in at $7.73 billion. That fell short of Wall Street expectations due to weaker performance in the film and television business. Paramount Plus saw revenue growth of 25%, with subscribers rising by 3.5 million in the quarter to 72 million. Now, on that side, that was better than the expectations. Meanwhile, filmed entertainment revenue decreased 34%, and TV media sales fell by 6%. Joining us right now to discuss this and so much more about what's going on with the media giants, the rest of the landscape in media land, Puck's Matt Belloni. Good morning. We can talk about Paramount, but I would really want to talk more broadly about what happens in a post election world where Trump has now won. The regulatory world may be shifting under our feet in a very different way, and what your sources are telling you about what transactions and things may be possible or may not.
Well, listen, there's certainly optimism in the C-suites of entertainment and media companies because it's pretty clear over the next few years there needs to be a realignment, a consolidation, and some of the CEOs, like David Zaslav at Warner Discovery, he's openly cheering for it. He's basically saying to the market, we need to consolidate. We have been stymied by this past administration or the current administration, and we're hoping that the new administration will let us do what we need to do to, in his words, make everyone better. And he thinks he's directly equating this to the consumer experience, but it really here is what he believes needs to happen in the industry. And that's, they need to merge, they need to do joint ventures, they need to consolidate their streaming services. And if he's right, that's going to happen over the next few years.
6 months ago, Matt, they asked, and David, believe me, Democrat, huge. But 6 months ago, they asked him, I don't know if you remember what he said. He said, I'm for whichever candidate is best for the business. And when he said that, I was like, oh my God, it almost sounded like he was not just dismissing the notion of a Trump presidency out of hand. It almost like he was saying, I'd almost be open to, that's the way I read it, and I'm longtime friends with him. I know how he feels.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that the tech world and the entertainment world has been really put off by particularly Lina Khan and some of the actions by the Department of Justice. And that's what they are talking about. And he did openly say at Sun Valley that I'm for whoever's going to let us consolidate. And there is a sense in the industry, you think of Hollywood as this bastion of liberalism, but there was a sense that people had their fingers crossed for a result in this election that would let them consolidate. I actually believe that if Harris had won, that she might have taken some action against Lina Khan. But now I think it's pretty clear what we're going to get, because President Trump's first term did allow more consolidation. Now, there's the personal element there, because remember, in that first term, the Department of Justice went after AT&T's acquisition of Time Warner then. And now David Zaslav owns that same asset, CNN, that was supposedly the problem for President Trump. So would Trump be a little bit less likely to let Warner Discovery do what they want to do because he's not a fan of CNN? And the same goes for Disney with ABC News, which Trump is currently suing, or Comcast with this program and this network, and more importantly, MSNBC. Will that become an issue in this race to consolidate?
So Matt, let's talk about the chessboard. Let's talk about the various permutations of things that you could imagine coming together or not. You just mentioned the parent company of Comcast, which, of course, is considering spinning off, as you said, this network, MSNBC, potentially Bravo, Sci-Fi, E, some of the other channels, the Golf Channel and the like, into another company. You obviously have Paramount, which we just discussed with their earnings this morning. There's questions about what you think of the future of Max looks like. There's the Disney piece of this. Walk through the sort of chessboard as you see it, and who you think really wants whom.
Well, there's three companies that are, I think, in play. It's Paramount, which is obviously being sold right now to the Skydance Group, and that transaction is scheduled to close in the first or second quarter. But they could do some deals with their cable channels, with other assets. We don't know exactly the disposition of Paramount. We know that they are bullish on streaming. We saw the results today, 3.5 million additional subscribers, a profit in streaming, which is significant, but it's not big. The other two are Warner Discovery, which is openly saying we want to consolidate. And if you read the S4 document on the Paramount sale, it goes through the background of the transaction. And David Zaslav at Warner Discovery was pretty heavily lobbying to merge with the Paramount assets, or at least do some kind of a deal. So we know he wants that. And then there's the NBC Universal assets, which could either be spun off. There's a scenario where they are spun off together with other cable assets. They could be a joint venture for streaming where Peacock combines with Max or Paramount Plus or all three, or perhaps they do a deal with some larger platform like an Amazon Prime Video where Peacock becomes part of that, or it's an international joint venture or something like that. There's a lot of scenarios on the play, but there's a lot of scenarios on the plate, but they all require working together amongst media and in some cases tech companies, and that's where the regulatory element comes in.